Welcome, welcome, welcome. We do have to use the microphone because of all the folks that are online. So that feels a little weird, right? Like teacher voice, like I have to use a mic, not a DJ. So bear with us on that. But as Megan and I were talking about this opportunity is that I haven't been to a ton of conferences in the last few years. So it's really no matter that we have to wear a mask, we have to use a mic, we have to stand in a certain place so the camera can see us. Who cares, right? We're all here. We're here together in community. And hopefully at the end of today's session, you'll walk out of here with a new idea, feeling good. I hear the keynote was amazing. So I hate that, right? You like to follow someone who strikes out rather than hits a home run. But we're gonna have some fun together. Everyone, I need to make sure everyone is. I see one person by yourself. There's just gonna be some activities where you need an elbow partner. So if you want to move now, that would be awesome. Yeah, so we're going to get started. Welcome. We're really glad that you're all here. Megan, who's the overachiever in our duo, was following all the registrants for us. And yesterday afternoon, we were the #1 total registration for this session. So, we also better not stink because of that. So, Warm Demanders Welcoming Classrooms is the title of our session. I hope by the end of that makes probably a little more sense than what it does on that. Just so you know, this is the camera, so if I'm like leaning this way, even though my class is this way, I like to use proximity, but there's sort of an expectation that they can see us, so I'll be going back and forth between that. So we'll do some introductions here. My name's Erik Swanson. I'm a senior advisor at the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, which the next slide I'll explain what that means, because I still I know the state actually doesn't know what that means, but we're working on that. That's another agenda. But, school guy, K-12, then principal, then executive director, then assistant superintendent services in a big urban district here in Northern California. So, and then now at a state agency providing support, which I'll talk about on the next slide.
Thank you. Good morning. So I am Meg Atkins. I work for the Los Angeles County Office of Education. Similar career path to Erik, paraprofessional, teacher, TOSA, assistant principal, assistant superintendent to where I am today. And with the Los Angeles County Office of Education, my position is solely in the Inglewood Unified School District. So we'll be talking a little bit today about the Inglewood Unified School District as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. So real quick, before we jump in, I am going to just get around there. I'm sorry, folks on camera. Hopefully you can hear me. CCEE is a state agency that was founded by Governor Brown and some legislative statutes back in 2013, where home base is near the Capitol in Sacramento. But the bulk of our work, at least in my center, what we do is we provide direct technical assistance to districts in the state of California who have been referred to us in one of three ways. One way is through the dashboard, our best friend, right? That dashboard. So if you are in differentiated assistance and receiving support from your county office, and still 3 or more of your subgroups for 3 consecutive years score red, you potentially could be referred to CCEE by your county office to receive direct technical assistance. So if we're thinking like the RTI model, think like county support would be like level 2, and then our support is that really sort of intense with partnership with the county, providing support into your district. Why that matters for this audience for an inclusion conference is most of the districts that are referred to us per that legislative statute have students with disabilities as one of their subgroups that are referred to us. We have lots of homeless and foster. We have lots of English learners as well with the districts. There are 6 total receiving support in the state, Inglewood being one of them, and why Megan and I are presenting here today. So the second way you can be referred to us, it's actually how Inglewood was referred to us, is if you take a loan out. I think many people know Inglewood, right? Southern California. It's where the new SoFi Stadium, where the Chargers and the Rams play. Go Niners. Their district office is literally like half a mile from that stadium. It used to be a really large district with about 18,000 kids. It now has about 7,000 kids. Lots of students have departed. When the loan happened, it's tight. It's tight in the community. The community lives in a ton of poverty. And so when they took the loan out, that qualified Inglewood for support from CCEE. At that point in time, 10 years ago, we didn't even really exist. but then through the legislature, they were referred to us when we were ready to provide them with some support. The last final way is the state superintendent of public instruction can actually just see a district that may be in need and refer them to us. We don't have any districts that have come to us that way. So I just wanted to set the context of, in our presentation today, why Megan from the Los Angeles County Office of Education, who's providing direct support in special education in Inglewood, is here with me, and we're presenting at an inclusion conference. So that is that slide. No, I think we're good. Okay, so we had this great idea about, don't worry about your phones, because I'm just moving away from it. I'm like, my stupid QR thing, it like didn't upload right, and so like it was like, oh, let's get them all engaged. But what's really important to recognize is that we had to submit this deck like a month ago. We didn't know who was going to be here. We don't know how to craft our presentation to the audience the best way. So 2 quick things. One, the deck that you're seeing today is different than the deck that might have been shared with you already, because we submitted that a month ago. And so we're like always like continuous improvement. So we've added things. We will send this updated revised deck to you. So just know that's there. So really important for us to know who's in the room, although we did some stalking on the app to see who you are. Like everyone, like the whole city of Modesto's here. Where's the Modesto people? So like we saw like 8, they're playing hooky. Okay, so yeah, there's like 6 people from Modesto. Like, so I would love to know, boots on the ground, any teachers, paraprofessionals, like working directly with kids in the room, raise your hand. Kim, thank you. That's our room volunteer right there. No idea what your class is doing today, right, that you're here. So yeah, okay. So some teacher, okay, cool. Site level leadership in the room, so principal, coach, anything, assistant principal. Awesome. District level. Okay. Yeah. The dark side. Yeah. So yeah. Awesome. How about county level partners? Awesome. Thank you for being here. County level partners. I think there's potentially some university partners maybe in the room. Maybe. Thank you for being here. And then any group that I did not name, is it some non-public agencies in here? Okay. So I saw a nice mix. It's not just one particular group. So we'll try to do our best to make sure that we're meeting your needs in the time here. So the objectives for today.
All right. So our objectives for today, the first thing that Erik had said, we want you to leave here feeling good. That's number 1, our objective for today. But here, really understanding what it means to be a warm demander and how that will support creating inclusive classrooms for our students with disabilities. Also, we would like to have you understand just the history of the laws. That's going to be me, the policy and laws piece behind inclusive practices. And then the last, just understanding a little bit of the case study of the work that we're doing to support the Inglewood Unified School District.
Thank you, Megan. And just so you know, being that we didn't know who was going to be here, there may be some things today that you guys already know, and they're almost like no duh type things, but just know that you're the high achievers in the class, and there's always opportunities for the ones that already know what we're teaching to support others in the space. And so I'm hopeful that throughout the deck, there are going to be some things that you're able to learn. So who has heard of or seen the Margaret Wheatley's work around, it's like the 6-circle or the 7-circle model called above the green line and below the green line? Who has seen this? Wait, a little checking for understanding. Okay, so the majority actually, so it is a pretty brilliant idea on how to think about school level challenges, but I'm going to oversimplify it based on time. So above the green line, think are like technical aspects of the work we do. So policies, procedures, bell schedules, all the things that are sort of like finite or black and white, things that exist on paper, things that exist like in artifacts on the walls. That is like, those are the technical things. Master schedule, very technical, right? So it's important to acknowledge that there are a ton of technical components of inclusion, right? So it's really important when we're thinking about creating solutions that we identify, are we facing a technical challenge, which is the above, and then below is what we call adaptive challenges. And this could be characterized mostly by like just relationships, right? Teacher to student, student to student, teacher to teacher, teacher to admin, across the system, teacher to parent, school to community, all the relationships, all those connecting, all that connective tissue that makes our schools and school communities go are below the green line. So today's presentation, the half that I'm going to be doing on the front end is mostly focused on below the green line elements of our work. So how we're forming quality and authentic relationships, because we know that when the young people are included into our classrooms, that is very critical for all students, but specifically for students that are in need of a little extra assistance and support at times in our classrooms. So, and then the second half of the presentation, Megan's going to cover a lot of the above the green line stuff that's happening within special ed, within the landscape of California, but also within your classrooms and schools and districts. And it's just important for you as we're going through the presentation to just be super mindful about your setting, right? What's going on where you're at? How can you be the change? I know it sounds super corny. I can't believe I just said that. But I think part of what our presentation is about is that I work for the state of California. There's 6 million students, actually 5.9 now, and I'm one person working hard every day. Like, really, what can I actually do, right? But that mindset's not going to do anything for the districts or the students that I'm supporting. So be the one person or the community of people in this space that takes this back, the keynote, your time here, but also anything that you learn along the way to try to make a difference for that student in your classroom or that group of students through how you're showing up in the space. So. Okay, favorite part of this presentation, favorite teacher activity. So what's going to happen, I'm going to give you a little bit of think time, and we're going to pair up or go in triads, and you're going to have about a minute each to share. We have to think about our favorite teacher. Now, if you don't have a favorite teacher, like your favorite coach or pastor or whatever, I would really like you to narrow in on your favorite teacher if you can think of one. But I also understand there's probably some folks that maybe didn't have a favorite teacher. I want you to be able to share your teacher's name with your partner. What grade or subject did they teach, or at least when did you have them? And that could be in multiple grades or multiple subjects, but share that. And then I want you to share like what made them your favorite teacher. And I want you to focus in on the qualities of that teacher. And I want you to be able to share because we're going to share out at the end of it. So pair up 1 minute each. You're going to share uninterrupted about your favorite teacher, and then I'll tell you time, and then you're going to rotate. And I guarantee this room is going to get a little loud, and there's going to be a lot of smiles on your face because thinking about our favorite teachers usually brings some amazing feelings back to us because they made a difference in our lives, just like you're making a difference in all of your young people's lives. So we clear on the activity. Check for understanding. Kim, have the folks online just write in those 3 answers onto the chat because I'm going to come to you when we're done. Okay, pair up. First minute, decide who's going first, and go. Bring you back together. Even with masks on, I can tell you're smiling and taking selfies, ussies. Amazing. Incredible. Modesto, I know you're online. Thank you for being here. Kim our room person just told us that, so thank you for being here. I know you can't see me, but you just have to deal with that. Okay, I need some brave, let's go with 3 brave folks in this room. I'm going to have to bring you the mic so the folks online. If you're willing to share your favorite teacher's name, grade, subject, and what made them your favorite teacher.
Thank you. You're quite welcome, sir. So my favorite teacher was Mrs. McComsey. She taught 2nd grade at the elementary school just up the street from my house. She was an amazing woman because she really invested in relationships with all of her students. She even had her husband actually carve all of our names into wooden plaques for our desks. So we had our own personalized wooden plaque. And as I got older and would go up to the school on the weekends to ride my bike or do whatever, she'd always be in her classroom working, and she would welcome me in and talk to me and see how things were going. But very amazing woman.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. My eyes are watering, by the way. Okay, so who's next? 2 more. Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm going to go with a coach I had. I had a tennis coach who we had a relationship that I don't think you could have now. He gave me lessons every Saturday. He took me to lunch after. And I had a terrible temper at sports, particularly at tennis. And he never shamed or made me feel guilty. He talked to me about, like, how do you channel your energy? How do you, you're just dispersing it, and so much about sort of the mental side of sports. And I had really had a bad temper. I thought I was like John McEnroe. And I went back and saw him, I don't know, in the last 10 years. I still keep in touch with him. And I've also been inspired to coach tennis because of him. But I went back and saw him, and he said, you know what I remember about you? And I'm like, oh man. He's like, your passion. And I was like, he really reframed for me like my whole experience of what I thought was this deficit that he saw in a totally different way. And I was like in my 30s, but it was a powerful coaching.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right, that's lovely. One more. I'm coming to you.
So I'm retired now, and I still work with teachers. My favorite teacher was my kindergarten teacher. My mom didn't really, I think my perception at 5 years old was that I was a pain to be and obnoxious and kind of annoying. And my kindergarten teacher told my mom I was brilliant.
You guys are amazing. Thank you for being brave enough to share. So, before I go to the next slide, I always do this when I'm fortunate enough to run this activity, that I truly believe some of our teachers may no longer be with us on earth, but I also believe that for those that aren't and those that are, when we all together on the count of 3 say their names out loud, all together collectively, that they're going to feel it or hear it, because it's the most admirable profession on the planet, in my humble opinion. So I'm going to go 3, 2, 1, and we're going to say their names out loud. You don't need to scream, but just don't whisper either. But so, okay, we have their name, of course. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Mr. Crystal. Good job. Okay, cool. So the next slide, we're not doing the word cloud either. Again, I'll talk about that. So I heard what you guys said, and it's here. The word cloud's in my head. I'm going to share it on this. So warm demander pedagogy. Again, volunteer or not volunteer, raise your hand if you have heard at all. You don't even know what it needs to mean. Has anyone ever heard about warm demander pedagogy? Okay, looks like about half the room. Okay, so it's pretty, I don't want to say self-explanatory, but warm, care, demand, expectations, high expectations, or insistence, right? So when we think about our favorite teachers, I can guarantee your favorite teacher was a warm demander, right? I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what it is, in this short session. My dissertation's on it, so it took me about 7 years. So high care, right? So the thing about the care research, I heard all 3 of you talk about care, right? When you talked about your teacher. The tricky thing about the care research is, and this is important for all of us when we're dealing with adults in the system, students in the system, our partners, our kids, our own kids, if you have them, that when you are in a caring relationship, it takes 2 parties, right? So I always ask teachers when I was a principal that we have all this data from students and all this survey data from students, all this survey data from teachers, and 100% of you teachers say that you care for your kids. And I believe that. But yet when we survey our kids, roughly 50% of the kids say there's an adult on campus that cares for them. And I was always curious about that incongruence, right? Because I truly believe that all the adults in this room and in those rooms really, truly cared for their kids. The challenge with the literature and the research on care is that the caring, us, and the cared for, the other, need to know they're in a caring relationship. When we hear reframing, or like support, all the things that you shared, you knew at the time that they cared for you. You may not have been able to articulate that, especially over here. Like, you may not have been able to articulate, but you knew there was something that was drawing you closer to them because they truly cared for you. Now, when a teacher who is lesson planning 2-3 hours a night and not reading her own children or his own children a good night story, they're showing care for their class because they want a kick-butt lesson the next day. But they walk into class with that kick-butt lesson with a bunch of 8-year-olds and do that kick-butt lesson. Kids don't necessarily interpret that as care, right? I could do a whole high school thing about that too. I love math. I'm a high school math teacher. Like, I'm making sure that all my students understand algebraic properties, algebraic functions. Like, I'm working my tail off so every single kid in my class knows exactly. And yet you don't know all your kids' names, right? So how do we show care? This is the challenging part sometimes in our space, is there's no one right answer in the research, but also in just our practice. But there are a few simple, basic truths about how students know that we care for them. Of course, knowing their name. Of course, connecting with them outside of the classroom, weekends, right? Riding your bike, like, she cares for me. She's here, she's saying, hey, how are you? How's soccer? How's tennis? How's church? How's your cousin? Knowing something specifically about them, just one thing, it helps to know more. Making sure that you are clearly and obviously dignifying them while they're in your space at all times is definitely another way to show care. I think if I gave you some time to table talk, you could list out probably 50 ways that you know explicitly to show care. I guess my challenge to every one of you in here that knows is to not forget that and assume that the people, whether they're adults or students you're working with, know you care about them. You need to make sure to be super explicit in making sure that the cared for are aware that they're in a caring relationship with you. Because once they know we care, we can expect. Care comes first. Who has worked in a middle school? I was a middle school principal for 5 years. If kids in a middle school don't know you care, that is where the mother FUs come from, right? It's just, God bless middle schoolers, but that's where they come from. Because when I say sit down, because you're acting a fool in my classroom, and you know I care, all right, Mr. Swanson, cool, boom. Don't know I care, the response is very different. So how we insist and expect is very critical for our included students and for all of our students, because they have to know. Your tennis example was probably, because it was a coach, is probably the clearest for me as who we shared that. I don't know if it was, I didn't hear if it was a he, right? He had high expectations for your game, right? I'm guessing your second grade teacher, your kindergarten teacher had high expectations for you. How do high expectations show up in a caring environment? Because the challenge in this space, oftentimes in education, high care comes at the expense of expectations. I love all my kids. I know you have 3 young siblings. You come to school. I know your mom's working 2 jobs. You don't need to worry about your homework. I'm caring for you. And that doesn't work, right? Because now you have this enabling relationship with your teacher where you're not expected to learn grade level standards. So then that happens over time, and then your dream gets further and further away from you because you can't perform in school, right? So that relationship is, I know XYZ, your family, boom, boom, boom. When's a good time for you to finish those? I'm sorry, I'm picking on you, but when's a good time for you to finish those assignments? Because they're expected in my class, right? Some of you guys, if you do walkthroughs on teachers, you may see a teacher like, oh my God, he or she's so mean. Yet the kids are responding. Is that you? That's my wife, right? I call her and she's on the phone and she's like, sit down, Gonzalo. And I'm like, good Lord, they love her. They hug her, and she's 3rd grade teacher, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. They come back and see her because they know she cares, she loves them. And she shows them in so many ways, right? So mean sometimes shows up as high expectations, but it's really clear to me after everything that I did is that balancing these two things is really a challenge, because what does high expectations with low care look like? Your assignment's late. I treat all these kids exactly the same. You get a 0. I have high expectations for all the students in my class. What, you want me to lower my expectations? What am I doing for her if I lower those expectations? She's not going to get a free pass. So then what happens? Relationships shatter, not inspiring, not a tennis teacher, a 2nd grade teacher, right? So it's figuring out how to manage the tension between, Warren Demander is figuring out how to manage the tension between being in a high care relationship, but also insisting on your students and adults' best each and every day. It can be done. It was done for you by that one teacher you named, or more than that teacher. You're all here. You had great teachers and coaches, right? So the last challenge that I say on this particular slide, which I spent way too much time on, is, are you showing up as that person? It's not anything to beat yourself up over. I fall short of Mr. Crystal every single day, right? But it's aspirational, and it should be aspirational. So are we showing up like the person whose name we said for our students or for our adults or for our loved ones in our life? So, okay. So I just wanted to bring back, and a good teacher, like, this is our framing. Coming back to this, I just covered a ton about the below the green line. Remember, we have an hour session on what it means to be a warm demander, to create welcoming and challenging environments for our students and tried to give you a few explicit sort of strategies sort of subtly in there. Kim, any questions that jumped out on that on the chat? Okay, perfect. So now we're going to transition to Megan's part where she's going to be talking a ton about like the above the green line and then all the technical aspects of inclusion and special ed inside our classrooms in the state of California. And then hopefully I am able to bring those together a little bit for us so we can see how they sort of interplay and intersect through the example of Inglewood Unified. So.
Thank you. All right. So back to what Erik had said at the beginning, we know a lot of this information, particularly in my section, you already know. So we also want to be able to have these slides for you so that the work that when you go back to your school sites, if you are leading work toward inclusion or just extending the work already at your site, that you do have some resources, we'll have some quotes, we'll have all the references at the end, so you do have that. So just kind of also look through that lens as we're going through. Also just to kind of level set our discussion about inclusion. This particular piece, I love the section that says it's an inalienable right to belong, not to be excluded. And I think that not to be excluded part is so important when we're talking about inclusion. Who here has been on a campus where we have seen our students with disabilities in the back bungalow off to the side of the campus? Right? We get told all the time, well, that's the only gated yard that we have. That's where it's safe. And what if we start to rethink with our teams, how do we create other environments? How do we create other safe places for our students not on those outskirts of being excluded? So I love that piece of this definition of what inclusive education is. Also, I think it's really important that when we're talking to our teams about who inclusion serves, oftentimes we're talking, we're advocating for our students with disabilities, but we really want to start talking about how it benefits all of us, right? Our neurotypical students, our teachers, our parents, we all benefit from inclusive education. And so I think Austin will have some references later on for each of the different audiences so that you can talk to, again, why we want to have inclusive environments. But really, when you're languaging it at your sites, try to bring in the good points, of why we want to do it, not just for our students with disabilities, but all of the children on the campuses. And again, I think for this one here, I'm just going fast again, you'll get all of this, but this is the part, I don't know about you, that we really struggle with when it comes to inclusive education is that time around collaboration. I think when we talk about the warm demander piece, right, we have those feelings. And when it gets to the technical part, who here has struggled with finding time to collaborate, gen ed and special ed? Yeah. And it's even more difficult now post-pandemic, right? We're tired. People don't want to come after school to work after school. Even if we're offering extra pay, people don't want to come on Saturdays. We're short substitutes. So it's really difficult right now. But that's one of the key parts. If we're really going to include these, have these inclusive settings, we really need to make sure that we're having time for our staff to collaborate with each other. And again, just more about inclusive education. I think, again, looking at it as zero exclusion. So not only talking about inclusion, but not having anybody excluded is really important in our conversation. Also, the grace for the ongoing process. We're all at different levels. Who here has co-teaching at your school sites? Oh, that's amazing. Who here still has mild, moderate SDC classrooms? Right? So I think we can see there's a huge spectrum. We all want to get to that co-teaching model. That's the dream. It does take a lot of, again, collaboration, finances, additional FTEs, but there's that spectrum. And just know wherever you are on there, we can keep pushing forward. It's really important to give yourself a little grace and patience along the way. And then we're talking about why. So has anybody run up against concerns at your school site or any pushback on inclusive education? Okay. So we have a variety, yeah. So we started that also in Inglewood 4 years ago. It's getting a lot better, but so there's different ends of the spectrum, right? You're gonna have some, clearly our school sites that have co-teaching are bought in, right? It's the right thing to do. You all are here, you have paid, you have taken your day off. You believe in this, it is the right thing to do. Some people we're gonna have to talk about, it's just the law. Like you just have to do it. I'm sorry, you don't believe in it, we have to do it. So we'll go through both those pieces today. I think this next. All right, so we're going back. Do you want to do this part? Me? Okay. So talking about it's just the right thing to do. This goes back to, again, what we were talking about with the warm demander. What are our core values? So when you're thinking about how you're going to push this forward, this work forward at your site, at your district, what are your core values that relate to an inclusive setting? If you'll take a little minute to talk to each other about those core values, and then we'll come back together.
Okay, bring everyone back together. Some of the things you may have shared, and I'm not going to call on anyone for this, but maybe included in the core values up there. Of course, your list is going to be a lot longer. I think one of the reasons that Megan and I wanted to include these core values into this presentation is that because of the wide spectrum of environments that we return to after this and different opinions around the importance of inclusion, connecting that to what I talked a little bit, the corny statement of be the change, right? It's going to come from our core values that sometimes because inclusion isn't written into IDEA, it is not explicit anywhere, that we have to be advocates. The analogy I made when Megan and I were planning on this is that, so Glenn Singleton, who wrote Courageous Conversations, which many of you I'm guessing have read, he talked about there's a difference between not being racist and being an anti-racist. And if you're not a racist and not yet an anti-racist, you're still on a moving sidewalk heading towards racism. And if we want to map that to the importance for our young people to be included into our classrooms, if we aren't turning around on that sidewalk and walking against it as an anti-racist or as an inclusioneer, which is the coolest title of any conference I've ever been to, it is your core values that's going to help you to make the turn and walk against the moving sidewalk, against all the voices and everyone that in your potentially in your space, and even in the first or second or third layer of the spaces that you work in, that are talking about how hard it is, how we don't have the time, all the things that Megan listed. So it's the challenge around your core values is to make that turn. If you haven't, I'm guessing you have. But I know it's hard, right? Sometimes it can be really lonely. But if we're not making that turn, then we are heading towards exclusion. Unfortunately, our system is wired that way. And so we need to be the advocates. We need to, again, be the change. God, I'm going to hate myself out of this presentation by saying that so much. But it's just really important that we really identify, because in those moments that it's the hardest, we have to be really clear about who we are in those spaces and who we're fighting for, right? And it's the young people in our schools to have an opportunity to be included, but at the same time, as we know what the research says about the students who are already included in the general ed setting, about how beneficial it is for them to be in an inclusive setting and learning from their differently abled peers as well. And so, the core value slide.
Thank you. And for that other end of the spectrum, that we just have those people that we have to say it's the law, right? And then hopefully we'll bring them along and they'll start to see the progress. Just have included for you a list of just some of the key legislation acts that we've had over the last century around education. So I won't go into this. Again, when you have the slide, you'll be able to see that if you want to go back and read any of those. But the one that I would like to focus on, and the big change that we had, was the Endrew decision in 2017. Prior to this, we were underneath the Rowley standard. So when we were looking at the ed benefit that came from our IEPs, Rowley, which was 1982, and I don't know if you're familiar with that case. This was a child, she was deaf. Her parents in her IEP had requested to have an interpreter, had it removed by the school, said she would be okay with just her aids and lip reading. Parents said, well, she's only getting 60% of what's being said, and the law said, that's enough. Which is awful, right? So that was that bare minimum. They just had to make some ed benefit. That's all we had when we were under Rowley. And I'm sure if you've been around long enough, you heard it's the Ford, not the Cadillac, right? We've said that shamefully. Endrew changed that. Endrew finally defined for us what ed benefit a little bit better was. It was more than the minimus. And that's what came from this decision. And so when you're talking about more than the minimus, our students with disabilities must make the same progress as their peers. So if we're expecting our students to make 1 year progress, they come in at the beginning of 5th grade at end of 4th grade level, they leave 5th grade at the end of 5th grade level. So 1 year progress. The same is expected for our students with disabilities, that they make a year's progress, whatever that is, not that specific, but so from wherever they are, they must make that same amount of progress with our support services, all of the accommodations, all of that. So this really changed what our expectation is. Now imagine who's got a SDC at your school site that has more than 2 grade levels in it. Yeah, I've been an assistant principal at a school site. We had a mild mod SDC with K5. One teacher, Ms. Shacotford, bless her heart, right? How in the world were the students in Ms. Shacotford's room going to make the progress of their gen ed peers that had the benefit of having just 1 grade level being taught? It's impossible. It's an impossible task. So with that and with this, the only way that we can make that standard is inclusion. And I think that that's the part that we think we need to really express to our colleagues. We can't do it alone. We have to have our students in the gen ed classrooms, and we have to provide classrooms that they can attend. Any questions on Endrew, Rowley? Okay. Also, key legislation or key decision, right? Our Brown versus Board of Education. We all are very familiar with separate is not equal. And we have to remind that includes our students with disabilities as well. Separate is not equal. Being in that back bungalow, being in that fenced classroom, that is not the same. And so we really have to, we have key legislation that we can point to, key decisions to help bolster our movement toward inclusion. And to what Erik had said earlier, if you try to, control find in IDEA, you're not going to see the word inclusion in there. So if you also have those naysayers, you're like, point to me where it says we have to do inclusion. It's not in IDEA. However, LRE is in there, FAPE is in there. And so you can encourage them, how else can we make these standards if we're not doing inclusion? So I think that's the point of the conversation, is that that's the only way that we're going to achieve these outcomes is by creating these inclusive settings at our school sites. And again, this is preaching to the choir, but when you have the slides, you can use them however you want to. But disabilities are natural. We all have some disability. And I think that's the important part, that we are who we are. And nothing's by accident, and it's beautiful. And we all have different ways that we accommodate ourselves and each other. And we just have to be patient and kind with each other. And I think that's the part here, just to remember, this is all natural. And we all just have to support each other through. This one, when you go on here, it is just a Google Sheet, a Google Doc. You can download it to your computer. You can make a copy to your Google Drive if you have Google Drive. This goes through what we talked about at the very beginning about the benefits of inclusive practices based on the sphere. So how does the community benefit from, should I click on that? Just leave it like that. Okay, good. How do gen ed peers, how do families? That way also when you're talking to different audiences, that you have, again, ways that you can tap into what they can benefit from. So that's just a handout for you. I'm not going to go through that right now. Are you able to get onto it? Okay, cool. All right, and how to begin if you haven't begun.
I'm not going to necessarily go over this whole slide because I know that actually there's people in our space and online that probably touch in all these different settings. But some of the research about like professional development or any sort of session is that people want opportunities to collaborate. They need on-time information, and they want a strategy or something they can use tomorrow, right? Like without that, you're not meeting the needs of your audience. And so for our planning, what we were talking about is just really wanting everyone in this space from the adaptive side, the below the green line side, if there was something that was shared about care or expectations that might be missing from a relationship that you have at work, whether it was with students or teachers or school leaders or district folks or whomever else, would love for you to make a commitment to yourself as you leave and head into your workspace, is to meet that commitment on either explicitly showing care or holding someone that knows you care about them to better standard. And that's sometimes even harder, right? Is not letting your quote unquote colleague friend turn in that really important thing late again, or not meet their best. Because one of the things that is really important about expectations, and it didn't necessarily show up really explicitly with the 3 folks that shared, and that's totally cool, is oftentimes when you do this in a large enough space and enough people share, is you'll start to hear it, he or she, like they expected me, like she was no nonsense. You hear that stuff, right? She made me work so hard. And that's your favorite teacher, right? Because you think you go into it, you think the 5th grade teacher that shows movies and has popcorn every Friday is going to be your favorite teacher. And the research that I did for my study is the students in those spaces always got the worst grades because they didn't have to be on. When you walk into a space and there's high expectations, you meet those. If you have a boss that's a warm demander, you show up, you do your best each day, you leave with a better sense of satisfaction and self-efficacy in your work. So you feel better about being part of that organization and part of that team because of that leader who expected your best. So don't shy away from it. That's my challenge on this slide. Don't shy away from expecting your students or the adults you support. Don't shy away from expecting their best. But if you've learned anything, they have to know you care, or else you get that middle school response, maybe not out loud, but on their social media or something. Okay, so.
All right, so just going through the ways that we can have on the technical side, the support for inclusion listed here. Thank you to our universities. Again, this for our universities, right? How are we preparing our teachers who are coming out? How are we making our gen ed teachers feel comfortable having students with disabilities in our classrooms? It's not a magic wand that we have in special education. So that's a big piece. Also, just funding is important from the state and federal level. Fully funding IDEA would be amazing. At the state and district level, there's so much that you can do also. And we're going to talk a little bit about this with Inglewood Unified, but that clear vision. So making sure from the top that we are making this a priority. It's depending on what sector that you're in, it's a little bit more difficult, but really making sure that we're clearly articulating that inclusion is for all of our students. Also, again, making sure that we have opportunities for collaboration, that we're fully funding all of these positions. Oh.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much. Okay, so I want to name the Inglewood case study for you guys so you have a better sense of when we have technical challenges, we need to provide technical solutions. Remember, above the green line, we have adaptive challenges, we need to provide adaptive solutions, and sometimes there's both. Sometimes we need to be really innovative. So when we were assigned Inglewood, CCE is the we in that situation, because of the loan being in receivership. What we do in CCE as part of the direct technical assistance, we do what's called a systemic instructional review, SIR, and we come in and we do a ton of artifacts, examining artifacts, looking at your data, empathy interviews, up and down the system, side to side in the system, families, students, teachers, leaders, to learn the most we can. While we were doing the SIR in Inglewood a handful of years ago, 3 or 4, we realized really quickly in that process that Inglewood was really out of compliance with their special ed timelines. And it wasn't something, I know that's something that we all sort of have to manage, but that wasn't something that we at CCE felt like we could wait till the end of the SIR process. So we hired, at the time we didn't know it was Megan, but we invested through CCE, through the state, into the Los Angeles County Office of Education, a position that would come in to provide some capacity and support to get Inglewood into compliance. And I'm going to say why that was really important. That was Megan, so thank you, Megan. She worked really hard over the last handful of years. So in special ed, compliance would, of course, be technical, right? It's above the green line. The beauty of thinking about things with the green line is that sometimes, as you start to address some technical challenges, you create opportunities and openings in the adaptive. Vice versa, adaptive creates opportunities in the technical. I always thought as an educator that you had to have all these relationships first before you could start doing some technical shifts. But Inglewood is an example. Kendi in How to Be an Anti-Racist talks about the Affordable Care Act and how that changed mindsets and relationships after a technical shift. But Inglewood's shift was getting them into compliance, having systems and structures in their district allowed for the conditions to form authentic relationships. It created the time and the space and the energy for them to start to engage with each other in healthy ways in the support of students, in the support of teachers, in the support of school leaders. Because when you are one of the worse districts with compliance, and everyone knows that, that creates a ton of pressure. That creates a ton of I'm in a hurry. That creates a ton of I don't have time for that. So adding the capacity, which I understand, like, CCE's not going to pay for Megan in my district, right? I get it, right? So, but just thinking about how, as we're talking about above the green line and below the green line in our short hour with you guys today, just know that solutions can come from anywhere, above or below. And as you're strategizing around how to make change in your systems, as you start to examine what are some of the challenges, it may become more clearer to you, knowing that they most often will fall into the buckets of technical and adaptive. So that was the Inglewood case study. And there, I'll say this, we still have a long way to go, right? Like, Inglewood's still working really, really hard. The team there is amazing, including Megan and her colleagues. But we've worked hard for 3-4 years to get to a space where the conditions are ready to take flight. So I just want to make sure I'm being really authentic there.
Yeah, okay. And I think just to that part too, just to share that every professional development, every meeting when we first got this, I'm starting my 4th year in Inglewood, was all about compliance. So we never got to have discussions around instruction. We never looked at data. We never got to talk, well, except for, from SAYS, of course. We never got to talk about how can we create inclusive settings? How can we, none of those conversations could happen because everything was about compliance. And so for this space, that was my role. That's why I came in, was to work on the compliance piece. And now it's amazing the conversations that we're having at all levels around inclusive education. It's in our LCAP, it's in our strategic plan from the top down. We're talking about inclusive settings now. So it's 3 years. So it's definitely possible. We have a long way to go, but a lot of progress in 3 years. And here, this goes back to just if you are in the classroom, ways that you can create an inclusive setting. So our administrators in the classroom, one thing I did as a principal at the end of the year when we did the reorganizations of our classes, and terrible, I feel terrible. When I was a principal, we actually had the pink and blue cards, which are shameful, so I feel like I need to just call it out now. But during that time, we also had the conversation about whose classroom the students would be mainstreaming into, because we did have those mild mod SDCs, and we did that during reorganization. So that way also set the tone for the whole year. This is important. We have the expectation that we're going to have our students included if they do have SDCs. Of course, we want to move away from that, from the top down, and that way the teachers already had the classroom set up, right? They knew they would have, Romeo coming in for ELA every day. They had a class set up. They had his name on the chart. They had his pencil box. So from the very beginning of the year, there was a space for the child. So there's ways within the school site that you can set this up too. And in here, again, I'm not going to go through. I always find this helpful. I don't know how many times I've sat in an SST meeting because I'm like pulling my hair out, something I couldn't do with a student, and someone would give me a suggestion. And I was like, well, yeah, of course. I can't believe I didn't think of doing that, right? Like, we all had that space like, oh, yeah. So here are just some questions for when you're in IEP meetings. Particularly, if you are a gen ed colleague and you pull some of these ideas out, it would just mean the world for our special educators to know that you are trying to include their students in the classroom. So just use these just as some stems if you need them. And I love this as a totally cheesy clip art image. But I think about this, right? Like, all of us in the pool. Like, everybody can be in the pool. Everybody needs different supports. I'm like that one that has the floaty pink flamingo that has the drink. Right? That's the support I need. So everybody can get the pool, right? You have the ring, you have the little arm floaties, but we can all get in the pool. Think of that with general education. We can all be in a gen ed classroom at some point during the day. Just what supports do we need to provide for our students? That we'll go through. Again, some more questions to ask during your IEP meeting. Make sure that we are doing inclusion as much as possible in our gen ed rooms. And this is just a summary for you of 4 of the major principles of effective inclusion. So looking at diversity, individual needs, reflective practice, and again, that collaboration piece. It's not going to happen if we don't have opportunities for collaboration across grade levels and also with our gen ed and special ed peers. It can't happen without that. 3 minutes.
And that one. Thank you so much. Okay, so I was just going to bring this back to the forefront, but I already had introduced it in the middle. So we're just going to skip this, and we're just going to do a little checking for understanding with the 3 minutes that we have left around our objectives. I just reread Objective 1, and it's pretty ambitious, but at the end of the session, you'll understand and know how to apply the leadership moves of being a warrant demander. You're all warrant demanders. Let me just anoint you, okay? Good job. What a hour well spent in this time. More seriously, I think probably the most salient piece of information that was an aha while I was doing my research is that it's a two-way street, right? The caring and the cared for. Like that's really pronounced for me in making sure that I show up in a way that I create the space for the cared for to know that they're cared for. So number 2, at the end of the session, each participant will be able to articulate the history and laws. Well, at least you'll have this amazingly long and well thought out deck to use and pull and still and introduce into your settings if you need it. And then using the case study of Inglewood Unified School District, at the end of the session, each person will have creative, innovative strategies to apply in their own districts at more inclusive classrooms. I think the takeaway on that one is before we're at a frustration point, know that sometimes the Rubik's Cube is really hard to solve, right? And that's okay. But if we have some tools and some frameworks to look at the problem that can help us better organize how we're gonna maybe foster and collaborate on solutions. And if you're collaborating, fostering solutions for the wrong or the wrong challenge, so if I'm creating adaptive solutions for technical challenges, that's gonna just cause more frustration. And vice versa. So if we're working with an adaptive challenge, we want to make sure that we're devising adaptive solutions for those. So of course, we met all these sessions. We came in just under the keynote, I'm assuming. But I'm glad you guys were all here, and we wanted to say thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of your conference, and continue being someone's favorite teacher. Thank you.